The message came in at 5:43 p.m. I remember because I was standing in the grocery aisle, holding a box of cinnamon sticks, debating whether they were necessary or just a habit. Christmas always made me sentimental like that, buying things that smelled like warmth, like home, like something I still believed in. My phone vibrated once. Not a call. A text. I smiled without thinking. For a second, I expected it to be practical. A reminder. A question about arrival times. Something normal. Instead, I read, "Stay away this Christmas. The families had enough of you." No greeting. No explanation. No signature. Just my father's name at the top of the screen, solid and final. The noise of the store faded. Carts rolled past me, a child laughed somewhere nearby, holiday music played softly overhead. All of it felt distant, like it belonged to a different world, one I'd just been excluded from. I stared at the message again, half expecting it to change. It didn't. I put the cinnamon back. By the time I reached the checkout counter, my hands were steady. That surprised me. I'd imagined a moment like this would break me. Tears in public, a shaking voice, the urge to call someone immediately. None of that happened. I paid. I thanked the cashier. I walked out into the cold evening air, breath fogging up in front of me. Only when I sat in my car did I reread the message slowly, word by word. Stay away. This Christmas. The families had enough of you. Not we need space. Not let's talk later. Enough. Like I was a noise they'd finally decided to turn off. I didn't reply. I drove home in silence, passing houses already lit up with decorations. Wreaths on doors. Trees glowing behind windows. A neighborhood rehearsing belonging. At my apartment, I set the groceries down and leaned against the counter. The quiet felt heavier than usual. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock I'd never bothered to fix. This was supposed to be my first Christmas in years without work obligations. I'd planned to go early, help cook, wrap gifts, stay longer than usual. I'd even bought small things I knew they liked, not because they asked, but because I always remembered. I picked up my phone again. No follow-up message. No clarification. I thought about calling him, then my mother, then my sister. But the truth settled quickly. If this message had come from anyone else, I would have asked questions. Because it came from my father, I already knew the answers. This wasn't impulsive. It was discussed, agreed upon, delivered. I sat down at the small kitchen table and tried to trace backward. When had things shifted this far without me noticing? The last time I'd been home, my father barely looked up from the television when I arrived. My mother hugged me distractedly, already talking about my sister's plans. My sister, as always, had something going on. Something urgent. Something expensive. I'd helped anyway. I always did. That night, I didn't cry. Instead, memories lined up quietly, as if waiting their turn. The times I rearranged my schedule to help with bills. The weekends I spent fixing problems that weren't mine. The phone calls that only came when something needed smoothing over. I'd mistaken usefulness for belonging. I looked around my apartment, the modest decorations I'd started putting up earlier that week. A small artificial tree by the window. A box of ornaments still unopened. I hadn't finished decorating. I wasn't sure I wanted to anymore. At 9:12 p.m., my sister posted a photo online. A throwback from last Christmas. Smiling faces. Captioned with a heart and a tree emoji. I wondered if she already knew. I wondered if she'd agreed. I turned my phone face down. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the sentence in my father's message, not with anger but with clarity. The families had enough of you. I realized something unsettling. This wasn't the first time I'd been pushed aside. It was just the first time they'd said it plainly. And once something is said plainly, it can't be unheard. I didn't know yet what I would do with that truth. But I knew one thing. Christmas had come early this year. And it had brought honesty instead of warmth. The days after the message moved slowly, like the world had dropped into a lower gear. I went to work. I answered emails. I smiled at people who had no idea my family had just erased me from a holiday that had once meant everything. On the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, everything was being relabeled. I stopped thinking of the text as an attack. I started seeing it as a summary. For years, I'd been the one who filled the gaps. The one who showed up early and stayed late. The one who handled details no one wanted to think about. Appointments, paperwork, payments. It had always been presented as trust. We rely on you. You're the responsible one. I'd accepted that role without questioning what it cost me. My sister had never carried that weight. She didn't have to. She was the family's spark. The unpredictable one. The one whose mistakes were explained away as stress or creativity or bad timing. If she struggled, it was a crisis. If I struggled, it was private. I remembered one Christmas years ago when the heat went out in my parents' house. I'd driven 3 hours in a snowstorm because my father said he didn't know who else to call. I spent the night on the floor, fixing pipes while everyone else slept. The next morning, my sister complained the coffee wasn't strong enough. No one thanked me. At the time, I told myself that wasn't important. Now, it felt like a pattern stitched through my life. The text hadn't created the distance. It had revealed it. On Wednesday, my mother called. I watched the phone ring for a long time before answering. "Hi," she said softly, like she was stepping into unfamiliar territory. "Hi," I replied. Silence stretched between us. "I didn't know your father sent that," she said finally. I didn't respond. "He was upset," she continued. "Things have been tense." "Between who?" I asked. She hesitated. "Everyone." That answer said everything. "I didn't agree with how he worded it," she added quickly. "But you agreed with the message," I said. Another pause. "You know how he is," she said instead. "Yes," I replied. "I do." She sighed. "Your sister's having a hard time. She thought you'd understand." There it was again. The expectation that understanding belonged to me. "I understand," I said. "That doesn't mean I accept it." My mother sounded tired now. "We didn't mean to make you feel unwanted." I closed my eyes. "But you did," I said. After we hung up, I sat at my desk and stared at the calendar on the wall. Christmas Eve circled in red. A habit from years of planning schedules around everyone else. I took a pen and crossed it out. That night, I went through old photos on my phone. Not out of nostalgia, but curiosity. I wanted to see myself through time, unfiltered. In almost every picture, I was slightly to the side. Holding a plate. Watching a child. Standing behind someone else. Always present. Rarely centered. I thought about how often I'd been asked to compromise, to wait, to adjust, and how rarely anyone had noticed. By Friday, relatives started reaching out, not to ask how I was, to ask what happened. "Your dad's really upset. This didn't need to turn into such a big thing. Families should stick together." I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I was tired of translating my silence into something more comfortable for others. On Saturday morning, my sister finally texted. "Did you really think Dad meant that?" I stared at the screen. "He wrote it," I replied. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "You know he doesn't express himself well." I smiled sadly. "Neither do I," I typed. "But I still listen." She didn't respond. That afternoon, I boxed up the gifts I'd already bought. Not dramatically, just carefully. I labeled them and slid them into the back of a closet. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was acknowledging reality. The truth was, I'd been alone long before this Christmas. I just never let myself feel it. The text didn't isolate me. It freed me from pretending I belonged somewhere I was only tolerated. And with that realization came a question that lingered quietly, waiting for me to answer it. If I wasn't welcome there anymore, what would I do with all the space that left behind? I didn't make a decision right away. That surprised people later. When they tried to trace the moment everything shifted. They assumed there must have been a breaking point. Tears, anger, a confrontation. There wasn't. There was just a slow, deliberate pulling back. I stopped being available. It began with small things. I let calls go to voicemail. I replied to messages hours later instead of immediately. I stopped rearranging my schedule to accommodate sudden needs. At first, no one noticed. They were used to my presence being automatic. The first real reaction came when my father's credit card was declined. I didn't hear about it directly. I heard about it through my mother, who called that evening sounding flustered. "Did something happen with your account?" she asked. "No," I said. "Well, the payment didn't go through," she replied. "Your dad thought maybe." "I removed it," I said. Silence. "You, what?" "I removed my card from the account," I repeated calmly. There was a sharp intake of breath. "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm not part of Christmas," I said. I assumed I wasn't part of the expenses either. "That's not the same thing," she said quickly. "It feels the same," I replied. She didn't argue after that. 2 days later, my sister showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked different, tense. Her confidence held together by effort instead of certainty. "You blindsided us," she said the moment I opened the door. "I didn't," I replied. "I stopped." She scoffed. "You know Dad relies on that card." "I know," I said. "And you just took it away?" "I was told to stay away," I said. I listened. She crossed her arms. "You're being petty." "No," I said. "I'm being consistent." Her eyes flicked over my shoulder, taking in the quiet space behind me. "You're really serious?" "Yes." She shook her head. "Mom's barely sleeping." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied. "You don't sound sorry." "I'm not responsible for managing everyone's emotions," I said. That line seemed to hit her harder than anything else. She left without another word. After that, the calls multiplied. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Everyone wanted to talk. No one wanted to listen. They framed it as concern, but the message underneath was clear. "Fix this." I didn't. I spent the weekend doing things I'd postponed for years. I cleaned out my closets. I canceled subscriptions tied to shared accounts. I updated passwords. Each small action felt oddly grounding. It wasn't revenge. It was alignment. On Monday, my father texted me again. "This has gone far enough." I read it without reacting. "You embarrassed me," he added. That was the first time I felt anger, not at what he said, but at what he didn't. Not "I hurt you." Not "we should talk." Just image. I typed back once. "You told me to stay away." I respected that. His reply came almost instantly. "That doesn't mean abandon us." I stared at the words. 4 years, I'd carried responsibilities without acknowledgement. Now that I'd set them down, it was abandonment. I didn't respond. That night, I made myself dinner and ate at the table instead of the couch. I lit a candle. Not for atmosphere, but for intention. I was reclaiming space I'd given away without realizing it. The next day, my sister posted another photo online. This time, it was a decorated tree in my parents' living room. The caption read, "Family is everything." I felt no urge to comment. I muted her. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful yet. It was uncomfortable, but it was honest. And honesty, I was learning, had a way of making people nervous, especially those who benefited from your silence. The story changed the moment silence stopped working on me. It didn't happen all at once. It arrived in pieces, misplaced concern, selective truths, carefully worded messages that made it clear the family had decided on a version of events where I was the problem. I heard about it through my aunt first. "She's worried about you," she said, lowering her voice like we were sharing a secret. "Your parents think you're not doing well." "I'm fine," I replied. "That's not what they're saying." Of course it wasn't. By the end of the week, the concern had sharpened into something else. People weren't asking if I was okay anymore. They were asking what was wrong with me. My father called on Friday evening. "Enough," he said without greeting. "This ends now." "I didn't start anything," I replied. "You humiliated us," he snapped. "People are talking." "About what?" I asked. "That you've cut us off. That you've abandoned your family over a misunderstanding." I closed my eyes. "You told me not to come home," I said. "In writing." "That was a moment of frustration," he said. "You're taking it too far." "I'm taking it literally," I replied. There was a pause. Then his tone shifted. "You're being cruel," he said. "Your mother is crying every night." "I'm sorry she's hurting," I said. "But I'm not causing it." "You are," he insisted, "by refusing to let this go." I thought about all the things I'd let go over the years. My time, my comfort, my voice. "I'm not holding on to anything," I said. "I'm stepping back." "That's the same thing," he replied. "It isn't," I said. "It just feels that way to you." He hung up on me. The confrontation came 2 days later. They showed up at my apartment together, my parents and my sister, standing in the hallway like a united front. I didn't invite them in. "We need to talk," my mother said, eyes already red. "I'm listening," I replied, staying where I was. My sister crossed her arms. "You've made this a lot bigger than it needed to be." "I didn't," I said. "I responded to what was said." My father shook his head. "You're acting like we disowned you." "You told me not to come for Christmas," I replied. "You said the family had had enough of me." "That's not what I meant," he said. "But it is what you wrote," I replied. My mother stepped forward. "We raised you better than this." I looked at her calmly. "You raised me to endure. I'm done enduring." Her face crumpled. My sister scoffed. "So what, now you're the victim?" "No," I said. "I'm the boundary." That stopped her. My father's voice lowered. "If you keep this up, you're going to lose us." I nodded. I already did. The hallway felt tight, charged. "You could fix this," my mother whispered. "Just apologize. Come home. Let things go back to normal." I shook my head slowly. Normal was hurting me. My sister rolled her eyes. "You're unbelievable." "Maybe," I said, "but I'm honest." They left without resolution. That night, my phone buzzed with messages from relatives who'd heard the updated version of the story. Some accused me of being selfish. Others suggested therapy. A few warned me not to burn bridges. I didn't respond. Instead, I wrote down exactly what had happened: dates, messages, screenshots. Not to post. Not to expose. Just to anchor myself in reality. Gaslighting only works when you forget the truth. By Sunday evening, the pressure eased, not because they understood, but because they realized I wasn't moving. And something subtle shifted. They stopped asking me to fix it. They started adjusting to my absence. I sat on my couch that night, candle burning low, and felt something I hadn't expected. Not sadness. Relief. Because for the first time, I wasn't managing the emotional weather of an entire family. I was just managing myself. And that felt like enough. Distance doesn't announce itself. It settles. The weeks leading up to Christmas passed with a strange stillness. No more confrontations. No late-night calls. The family group chat stayed quiet, like a room no one wanted to enter first. At first, I kept waiting for something, an apology, an explanation, even another accusation. Nothing came. Instead, I started noticing what wasn't there. No emergencies disguised as conversations. No last-minute requests framed as favors. No pressure to rearrange my life to absorb someone else's chaos. The absence was louder than the conflict had ever been. Christmas Eve arrived quietly. I woke up early out of habit, then remembered there was nowhere I needed to be. No schedule to follow. No expectations to meet. I made coffee slowly, standing by the window as the city moved beneath a gray winter sky. My phone stayed silent. Later that morning, I went for a walk. Storefronts glowed with decorations, couples hurried past carrying wrapped boxes, children dragged parents toward displays of lights. I felt out of place, but not broken. Just separate. That afternoon, my aunt called. "I didn't want you to hear this from someone else," she said carefully. "Christmas dinner's been tense." I listened. "Your dad's been quiet. Your sister barely came out of her room. Your mom kept checking her phone." I pictured it without effort. "And?" I asked. "And it's obvious you're missed," she said. I didn't respond. "They don't know how to do this without you," she added. "I didn't know how to do it with them," I replied. She didn't argue. That night, I cooked a small dinner for myself. Nothing elaborate. Something warm and simple. I ate at the table, candle lit, music playing softly in the background. I wasn't celebrating. I was honoring peace. The days after Christmas confirmed what I'd suspected. Without me smoothing things over, the cracks showed. Bills were paid late. Plans fell apart. Small conflicts escalated because there was no one quietly redirecting them. My sister struggled more than she admitted. My parents argued more than they ever had when I was around to absorb the tension. I heard about it indirectly, in fragments. No one asked me to step back in. They knew better. I filled my time differently now. I spent evenings reading instead of fielding calls. I said yes to invitations without checking my phone first. I booked a short trip for the new year, something I'd always postponed because it wasn't a good time. It finally was. One evening, a few days before New Year's, my sister messaged me. Just one sentence. "I didn't think you'd actually stay away." I read it several times. Then I replied, "You told me to." A pause. "I thought you'd cool off," she wrote. "I wasn't angry," I replied. I was clear. She didn't respond again. I didn't feel victorious. I felt resolved. The new year arrived quietly. No fireworks. No dramatic turning point. Just a slow understanding settling into place. I wasn't unwanted because I lacked value. I was unwanted because my presence had made things easier, for everyone but me. And once I removed myself, the system had to face itself. That realization didn't make me bitter. It made me careful. Careful with my time. careful with my energy, careful with who I allowed close. I didn't close my heart. I just stopped leaving it unattended. The new year didn't bring reconciliation. It brought perspective. January passed without contact. February followed the same way. The distance that once felt unnatural began to feel intentional, like space that had been measured instead of abandoned. I learned how much of my identity had been shaped by anticipation, waiting for the next request, the next crisis, the next moment where I would be needed just enough to stay included. Without that noise, I noticed myself more. I slept better. I laughed more easily. I stopped bracing for disappointment. One evening, my mother called. Her voice sounded different, less guarded, less hurried. I was cleaning today, she said. I found some of your old things. I waited. You were always so responsible, she continued, even as a child. I heard what she wasn't saying. I didn't know how much you carried, she admitted quietly. The words didn't undo anything, but they acknowledged something. I didn't know how to put it down, I replied. We sat in silence for a moment. I miss you, she said finally. I know, I said. She didn't ask me to come back. I didn't offer. Later that week, I ran into my sister by chance, outside a cafe we both used to go to years ago. We exchanged polite smiles, unsure of how much history to bring into the present. She looked tired. You seem different, she said. I am, I replied. She hesitated. Dad still thinks you overreacted. I smiled softly. He's allowed to. She studied my face. You really don't regret it? I thought about the quiet mornings, the steady evenings, the absence of dread. No, I said. She nodded slowly, like she was processing something she hadn't expected. Christmas was strange without you, she admitted. I know, I said. She didn't apologize. I didn't ask her to. Because closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's a decision you stop revisiting. The message my father sent that December still lived in my phone. I'd never deleted it. Not out of bitterness, but as a reminder. Not of rejection. Of clarity. Stay away this Christmas. The families had enough of you. It wasn't cruelty. It was honesty. And honesty, once given, changes everything. I stopped trying to earn belonging where it had always been conditional. I stopped measuring love by endurance. I stopped mistaking silence for peace. I learned that family isn't defined by who excludes you, but by who makes room for you without cost. I didn't rebuild what was lost. I built something new, a life where I wasn't bracing myself, where my presence wasn't a favor, where I didn't have to be useful to be welcome. The family I came from may never understand that, but I do, and that understanding became my foundation. The Christmas I was told to stay away wasn't the end of my story. It was the moment I stopped asking for permission to belong.